I am Jessica, 35 years old, and a marketing executive who has always tried to maintain family relationships despite our complicated history. When I received an invitation to my mom Elaine's 60th birthday party, I felt genuine excitement. Maybe things were finally changing. But when I arrived at the upscale restaurant, my father Gerald intercepted me at the entrance. "You are not on the list," he said coldly, while family members snickered behind him. I smiled, handed over my carefully chosen gift, and walked away with my dignity intact. Before I share what happened next, let me know where you are watching from, and hit subscribe if family drama stories resonate with you. Growing up in a middle-class suburb outside Boston, our family looked perfect from the outside. The four-bedroom colonial with the manicured lawn and the shiny station wagon in the driveway told a story of American success. But inside those walls, the dynamics were far more complicated than neighbors could have guessed. My father Gerald ruled our household with absolute authority. A bank manager with an impeccable reputation in the community, he expected the same perfection at home. Every decision, from what we ate for dinner to what extracurricular activities we pursued, required his approval. My mother Elaine, once a promising artist, had long since surrendered her dreams to become the supportive wife and mother he demanded. I was their firstborn, and from an early age, I showed an independent streak that frustrated my father. I questioned rules, challenged assumptions, and refused to simply obey without understanding why. "Jessica just has to do everything the hard way," became his frequent complaint at the dinner table. My sister Amanda, 3 years younger, learned from my mistakes. She watched how my stubborn nature resulted in arguments, restrictions, and disapproval. Amanda became the perfect daughter instead, agreeable and compliant, carefully avoiding any behavior that might upset our father. When she brought home straight, as they went on the refrigerator, when I brought home straight, as with one B, my father only mentioned the B. "Why can you not be more like your sister?" became the soundtrack of my adolescence. Not that I blamed Amanda. She had simply found a way to survive in our household that I could not adopt without losing myself entirely. The divide grew during my high school years. While Amanda joined the cheerleading squad and dated boys my father approved of, I found refuge in debate club and journalism. I applied for a weekend job at 16 without asking permission first, causing a 3-day silent treatment from my father. When I won a statewide essay contest about civic responsibility, he dismissed it as showing off. Despite everything I tried to maintain a relationship with my mother. We had secret conversations when my father worked late, moments where I glimpsed the woman she might have been without his constant criticism. She taught me to appreciate art during quiet museum visits, speaking with passion about brush strokes and color theory, until we heard his car in the driveway. Then she would become quiet again, transforming back into the agreeable spouse she needed to be for peace. The breaking point came during my senior year of high school. I had been accepted to several prestigious universities, including my father's alma mater, but I chose Northwestern instead, with its renowned journalism program. The night I announced my decision, my father slammed his fist on the table. "I will not pay a penny for you to waste your time on a useless degree across the country," he declared. "I have a scholarship," I responded calmly, "and student loans for the rest." The look of shock on his face stays with me even now. He had lost his primary means of control. College became my first taste of real freedom. I excelled in my classes, worked part-time jobs, and built friendships with people who appreciated rather than criticized my determination. I called home weekly, speaking mostly with my mother, while my father conveniently found reasons to be busy. During holiday breaks, I returned to a household where I increasingly felt like a guest rather than a daughter. When I graduated and accepted a position at a marketing firm in Chicago, instead of returning to Boston, the final threads began to unravel. My visits home became annual events marked by strained conversations and unspoken resentments. Amanda, meanwhile, attended a local college and remained firmly embedded in family life. Over the next decade, I built my career with the same determination that had carried me through childhood. Each promotion took me further from that small colonial house and its suffocating dynamics. Yet success brought its own kind of loneliness. While colleagues celebrated milestones with proud parents and siblings, I marked mine alone, or with friends who had become my chosen family. There were sporadic attempts at reconciliation. When I won my first industry award at 27, I sent my parents the news. My mother called to congratulate me. My father sent a brief email noting that marketing seemed to be working out despite his concerns. When I bought my first condo at 30, I invited them to visit. My mother came alone, explaining that my father was too busy at work. 3 years ago, a health scare with my mother temporarily thawed relations. A suspicious mammogram result had us all holding our breath until the follow-up confirmed it was nothing serious. During those tense weeks, I spoke more with my family than I had in years. Even my father seemed to soften slightly, though he still could not bring himself to express any direct approval of my life choices. So when Amanda texted about Mom's 60th birthday celebration, I allowed myself to hope. Perhaps time had finally healed old wounds. Perhaps my father had mellowed with age. Perhaps we could finally be the family I had always wished for, instead of the one that had left me feeling perpetually inadequate. How wrong I was to hope. Some patterns are too deeply ingrained to change without intentional effort, and my father had never been one to admit he might need to change anything about himself. After graduating from Northwestern, I spent 2 years at a small agency in Chicago before accepting an opportunity at Premier Marketing Solutions in Boston. The decision to return to the same city as my family was difficult, but the career opportunity was too good to pass up. Premier was growing rapidly with an impressive client roster and a reputation for innovative campaigns. I started as an account coordinator, the most junior position on the team. My days consisted of creating reports, scheduling meetings, and handling the unglamorous administrative tasks that keep campaigns running. But I approached even the most mundane responsibilities with determination, often staying hours after my colleagues had left. Janet Franklin, the creative director, who would later become my mentor, noticed my dedication. 6 months into the job, she invited me to contribute ideas for a struggling campaign. The client, a regional bank trying to appeal to younger customers, had rejected 3 previous concepts. Fresh eyes might help, Janet explained. And you certainly have opinions on everything else around here. That night I stayed until midnight, developing a concept that drew on my own experiences as a recent graduate navigating financial independence. The next morning, Janet reviewed my work in silence before finally looking up. "This is good," she said simply. "Really good." The client agreed, and within a year I was promoted to account executive. By 28, I had become the youngest account director in company history. At 32, I joined the executive leadership team overseeing all client relationships and new business development. My professional success came at a price, though. While climbing the corporate ladder, I watched friends celebrate engagements, weddings, and baby showers. My own romantic relationships inevitably withered under the demands of my schedule. Dates were canceled for client emergencies. Weekends were consumed by pitch preparations. Even when physically present, my mind often drifted to work problems rather than engaging with the person across the table. By 35, I had a corner office, a 7-figure client portfolio, and an apartment filled with awards but few personal touches. The loneliness sometimes felt like a physical presence, especially during holidays and family occasions when social media became a parade of gatherings I was not part of. My management philosophy developed in direct opposition to my father's authoritarian approach. Where he demanded blind obedience, I sought to nurture talent and encourage innovation. My team knew I had high standards, but also that I would support their growth and champion their successes. When an opening for a senior graphic designer emerged on my team 3 years ago, I personally reviewed the portfolio submissions. Thomas Wilson's work immediately stood out for its clean, aesthetic, and strategic thinking. His cover letter revealed he had recently relocated to Boston from Seattle and was looking to establish himself in the East Coast market. During his interview, Thomas impressed me with thoughtful questions about brand positioning and audience engagement. He spoke passionately about design as a problem-solving tool rather than mere decoration. By the end of our conversation, I was certain he would be an asset to Premiere. "When can you start?" I asked after conferring briefly with Janet. "How about Monday?" he replied with an eager smile. Thomas quickly proved himself indispensable. His designs consistently impressed clients, and he demonstrated a rare ability to translate marketing objectives into visual concepts. He was also well-liked around the office, organizing happy hours and remembering colleagues' birthdays. If I occasionally noticed him checking his phone during meetings or leaving precisely at 5 on Fridays, I attributed it to healthy work-life boundaries rather than lack of commitment. About 6 months after hiring Thomas, I overheard him mentioning a dinner with Amanda to another designer. The name caught my attention given its personal significance, but I dismissed it as coincidence. Amanda is a common name after all. Even when he mentioned her studying to become a dental hygienist, the same profession my sister had pursued, I convinced myself it was merely an unusual alignment of details. The truth emerged during a company holiday party. I was mingling with clients when I noticed Thomas enter with a familiar figure on his arm. The woman was unmistakably my sister, though I had not seen her in nearly a year. They had not noticed me yet, so I observed their interaction from across the room. They looked happy, comfortable together in a way that suggested their relationship was not new. I approached them with a professional smile, determined not to create an uncomfortable scene at a company event. "Amanda, what a surprise," I said, giving my sister a brief hug. "I had no idea you knew Thomas." The color drained from Thomas's face as he looked between us in confusion. "You two know each other." Amanda squeezed his arm reassuringly. "Jessica is my sister." I mentioned my sister worked in marketing, remember? "You never mentioned she was Jessica Porter," he replied, clearly struggling to process this new information. "My boss, Jessica Porter." The remainder of the evening was awkward, to say the least. Thomas overcompensated by discussing work projects, while Amanda made strained attempts at casual conversation about mutual acquaintances from childhood. I excused myself as soon as was politely possible, retreating to my office to gather my thoughts. The following Monday, Thomas appeared at my door, looking anxious. "I want to assure you that my relationship with your sister will not affect my work performance," he said formally. "I can maintain professional boundaries." "I appreciate that," I replied. "And I want to assure you that your personal life is your own business. As long as your work continues to meet expectations, who you date is not my concern." We settled into an unspoken agreement after that. Thomas never mentioned Amanda during work hours, and I never asked about my family. If he occasionally seemed to know details about my schedule or preferences that I had not shared directly, I pretended not to notice. Our professional relationship remained productive, and I genuinely valued his contributions to the team. The discovery that Thomas was dating my sister had reopened old wounds I thought had scarred over. I found myself wondering what Amanda had told him about me, what family narrative he had absorbed. Did he know about the countless dinners where my achievements went unacknowledged? Had Amanda shared her perspective on why I had distanced myself from the family I would never ask, of course? The line between personal and professional had to be maintained. Despite my career success, the family estrangement left a void that accomplishments could not fill. I tried various ways to address it over the years. I sent birthday and Christmas gifts even when they went unacknowledged. I called my mother monthly, having brief conversations that carefully avoided any topics that might lead to tension. I even attempted to engage my father by asking his advice on investment strategies, one area where I genuinely respected his expertise. These efforts yielded minimal results. My mother remained warm but distant. my father coldly polite at best. Amanda and I exchanged occasional texts but rarely had meaningful conversations. Each rejection, however small, reinforced my belief that professional success was more reliable than family acceptance. At least at work, effort and results were directly correlated. In family matters, the rules seemed entirely different and perpetually beyond my grasp. The text from Amanda arrived on a Tuesday afternoon while I was reviewing quarterly projections. A simple message that made my heart race. Planning a surprise 60th birthday dinner for Mom next Saturday at Bellini's Persix. 7 p.m. Hope you can make it. I stared at my phone for several minutes, reading and rereading those words. An invitation after so many years of strained communication felt significant. I typed and deleted multiple responses before settling on, "Thank you for letting me know. I will be there." The week that followed was a strange mixture of hope and anxiety. I found myself distracted during meetings, mentally rehearsing conversations and preparing for potential scenarios. Would my father maintain his usual cold demeanor, or would the celebrations soften his stance? Would extended family members who had witnessed our estrangement over the years be supportive or judgmental? Most importantly, would my mother be genuinely happy to see me? Shopping for the perfect gift became an unexpectedly emotional experience. I wanted something meaningful that expressed both love and respect for the woman who had given me life, even if our relationship had become complicated. After visiting several jewelry stores, I finally found a double-strand pearl necklace with a platinum clasp. Classic and elegant like my mother herself. The $4,000 price seemed insignificant compared to the years of missed celebrations and conversations. As I watched the sales associate place the necklace in a velvet box and wrap it in silver paper, I imagined my mother opening it. Would she wear it immediately? Would she recognize it as a peace offering, as well as a birthday gift? The uncertainty was both terrifying and exhilarating. That Friday, I left work early to prepare for the weekend. My usual confident decision-making abandoned me as I stood before my closet, considering and discarding outfit options. Too formal might seem pretentious. Too casual might appear disrespectful. After trying on half a dozen combinations, I finally selected a navy blue dress that projected professional success without ostentation, paired with simple pearl earrings that would complement my gift to my mother. I called Sophia, my closest friend since college, for moral support. She had witnessed the entire arc of my family estrangement and had become my surrogate sister in many ways. "What if this is just another setup for disappointment?" I asked after explaining the situation. "Then you will handle it with the same grace you have shown for years," Sophia replied. "But Jess, what if it is not? What if this is genuinely an olive branch? You have to at least try." Her words steadied me. Sophia was right, as she often was about emotional matters. Even if the evening ended badly, at least I would know I had made the effort. The regret of not trying would be worse than any awkwardness I might experience. Saturday arrived with perfect early autumn weather. The drive from my downtown apartment to Bellini's took 30 minutes each mile, bringing a new wave of memories. I passed the high school where Amanda and I had both graduated, the park where we had played as children, the ice cream shop where our family had celebrated good report cards before achievements became a source of competition rather than shared joy. As I navigated through familiar neighborhoods, I allowed myself to imagine a positive outcome. Perhaps time had softened old grievances. Perhaps my father had gained perspective with age. Perhaps we could find our way back to some version of family that included mutual respect, if not perfect understanding. I rehearsed what I would say to each family member. For my mother, warm birthday wishes and genuine questions about her life. For Amanda, appreciation for the invitation and interest in her relationship with Thomas. For my father, respectful greetings without expectation of sudden affection. For extended family, polite updates on my career without seeming boastful. Bellini's came into view, its elegant facade lit by discreet spotlights. The restaurant was well known for its exceptional Italian cuisine and intimate private dining rooms, a perfect venue for a milestone celebration. I checked my appearance one last time in the rearview mirror, applied a fresh coat of lipstick, and gathered my courage along with my mother's gift. The hostess greeted me with a professional smile. "Good evening. Are you here for the Patterson party?" "Yes," I confirmed, noticing my voice sounded steadier than I felt. "The celebration for Elaine Patterson." "Of course. The private room is just down the hallway to the right. The family is already gathered." The family. Such a simple phrase that carried such complicated emotions for me. I thanked her and moved toward the indicated direction, my heels clicking softly against the marble floor. Through the partially open door, I could hear laughter and conversation, the familiar cadence of voices I had known all my life. For one brief shining moment, I felt a surge of pure joy. I was about to rejoin my family circle after years of painful separation. My mother would see that I had become successful while remaining the daughter who remembered her birthday. My father might finally acknowledge that my chosen path had merit. Amanda and I might begin rebuilding the sisterly bond that had frayed under family tension. I smoothed my dress, took a deep breath, and stepped toward the threshold, gift in hand and hope in heart. It would be the last moment of optimism I would feel that evening. I had barely reached the doorway when a large figure stepped into my path. My father, dressed in a charcoal suit that emphasized his imposing height, positioned himself like a security guard, preventing access to an exclusive venue. His expression contained no warmth, no welcome, not even the basic recognition one might offer a distant acquaintance. "Jessica," he said my name, sounding like an accusation on his lips. "What are you doing here?" The question momentarily confused me. Had Amanda not told him she had invited me? Was this part of the surprise for my mother? "I am here for Mom's birthday," I replied, trying to peer around him into the room where I could see my mother seated at the head of a long table, surrounded by familiar faces. "Amanda invited me." My father's expression hardened further. There must have been some misunderstanding. This is a family gathering. The implications struck me like a physical blow. After all these years, he still did not consider me family. "I am family," I said quietly, conscious of nearby diners who might overhear. "I am your daughter." He glanced down at the silver-wrapped package in my hands, then back at my face. His next words came with clinical precision. "You are not on the list." 4 simple words that carried decades of rejection. You are not on the list. You do not belong. You are not wanted here. Behind him, I could see Amanda watching our interaction with an uncomfortable expression. She made no move to intervene, to confirm her invitation to welcome me into the celebration. My mother remained seated, her back partially turned, seemingly unaware of the confrontation occurring at the entrance to her birthday dinner. Several relatives had noticed the exchange now. Uncle Frank, my father's brother, whispered something to his wife, Patricia. My cousin Samantha covered her mouth, but not before I glimpsed what appeared to be a smirk. The collective reaction felt like a verdict: Jessica, the difficult daughter, being put in her place once again. "I see," I managed to say, though my throat had constricted painfully. "I just wanted to wish Mom a happy birthday." I extended the gift toward my father, determined he would not see how deeply his rejection had wounded me. "Please give this to her." For a terrible moment, I thought he might refuse even this small gesture. His hand hesitated before finally taking the package. "I will see that she gets it," he said, with the same tone he might use to address a delivery person. The humiliation burned through me, but years of business negotiations had taught me how to maintain composure under pressure. I nodded once, straightened my shoulders, and turned to leave. As I did, I heard laughter from within the room. Whether it was related to my dismissal or coincidental timing, The sound followed me down the hallway like a taunting reminder of my exclusion. I kept my pace, measured, my expression neutral, aware that restaurant staff and patrons might be watching what appeared to be family drama unfolding in public. Only when I reached my car did I allow myself to acknowledge the pain. My hands trembled so badly that I dropped my keys twice before managing to unlock the door. Inside the privacy of my vehicle, I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel and struggled to breathe normally. What had I been thinking? That a text message could erase years of estrangement, that my father would suddenly welcome me after making it clear for decades that I would never meet his expectations, that my mother would stand up to him after a lifetime of acquiescence. Most devastating was Amanda's silence. My sister, who had supposedly extended the invitation, had watched my humiliation without a word of protest. Had the invitation been genuine at all, or merely a cruel setup designed to remind me of my outcast status? I sat there for several minutes, fighting the urge to cry, to scream, to march back into that restaurant and demand the dignity that should have been my birthright. But what would that accomplish, except to confirm their narrative of me as difficult and dramatic? A tap on my window startled me. A valet stood there, gesturing apologetically. "Ma'am, if you are not leaving, would you mind moving to a parking space? We need the loading area clear." I nodded, started the car, and drove mechanically to a spot at the far end of the lot. There, hidden from the restaurant's windows, I finally gave in to tears. Not the dignified, cinematic single tear rolling down a cheek, but ugly, gasping sobs that left my carefully applied makeup in ruins. The $4,000 pearl necklace now seemed like a monument to my foolishness. I had chosen it so carefully, imagining a touching moment of reconciliation that would never come. Would my mother even know it was from me? Or would my father present it as a collective gift from the family that apparently did not include me? My phone chimed with a text. "Amanda, sorry about that. Dad insisted this was immediate family only. Maybe we can meet for coffee next week." I stared at the message, incredulous. Immediate family only? I was their firstborn daughter. What could possibly be more immediate than that? And the casual suggestion of coffee, as if she had simply forgotten a minor social engagement rather than participated in my public humiliation. I did not respond. There were no words that could adequately express what I was feeling without either minimizing my pain or escalating the conflict. Instead, I put my phone on silent, fixed my makeup as best I could, using the rear-view mirror, and prepared to drive home to my empty apartment. As I pulled out of the parking lot, I caught a glimpse of the private dining room through a window. The curtains had been partially drawn back, revealing the celebration continuing without interruption. My mother was smiling at something someone had said. My father was raising a glass in what appeared to be a toast. Life continued in the Patterson family circle, unaffected by my brief appearance and swift ejection. That image would stay with me for days afterward, the tableau of family harmony from which I had been so deliberately excluded. The birthday candles, the champagne glasses, the comfortable intimacy of people who shared not just DNA but a sense of belonging. Everything I had wanted since childhood but had never quite managed to achieve. I drove aimlessly through the city streets, unwilling to return to my apartment where the silence would only amplify my thoughts. Radio stations cycled through upbeat weekend songs that felt like mockery given my emotional state. Eventually, I found myself at Riverfront Park, a place I had often visited during college when I needed to clear my head. The parking lot was nearly empty at this hour. I chose a spot overlooking the water and turned off the engine. The city skyline reflected on the river's surface, lights shimmering like the life I had built for myself here, beautiful but ultimately insubstantial. My phone had accumulated several missed calls from Sophia. She would be waiting to hear how the evening had gone, prepared to celebrate a reconciliation or comfort me through disappointment. But I could not bring myself to recount what had happened, not yet. Each retelling would require reliving the humiliation, and I was not strong enough for that tonight. Instead, I sat in silence, allowing memories to wash over me like the small waves lapping against the riverbank. Birthday celebrations from childhood when family had seemed simpler. My 10th birthday when my father had actually praised my academic achievements in front of relatives. My 16th when my mother had secretly arranged for my first art lesson, knowing I had inherited her creative sensibilities. Graduation parties where accomplishments were acknowledged but somehow always found slightly lacking. The pattern was so clear now, viewed from the distance of adulthood and professional success. Nothing I achieved would ever be enough to satisfy my father's expectations, because those expectations were not really about me at all. They were about control, about molding me into a version of myself that validated his worldview and authority. My phone buzzed again. Sophia was now texting, "Worried about you? Please call when you can." I appreciated her concern but could not face conversation yet. What would I say? That my own father had treated me like an unwelcome stranger, that my sister had invited me only to stand by silently during my rejection, that my mother had not even turned to acknowledge my presence. The crushing weight of never being enough settled over me like a physical presence. Years of therapy had helped me understand intellectually that my worth was not determined by my father's approval, but knowing something intellectually is different from feeling it emotionally. Tonight, all the progress I had made seemed to unravel, leaving me once again as the desperate child seeking validation that never came. As midnight approached the park, security began their rounds. A flashlight beam swept across my car, pausing briefly before moving on. I realized I could not spend the night here, regardless of how reluctant I was to face my empty apartment. The thought of returning home, removing the carefully chosen outfit, washing away the makeup I had applied with such hope, and climbing into bed alone was unbearable. On impulse, I started the car and drove to the Westin downtown instead. If I was going to feel alone, I might as well do it with room service and premium cable. The night clerk raised no eyebrows at a well-dressed woman checking in late on a Saturday with no luggage. This was a business hotel. Unusual circumstances were their normal. I paid for the room with my corporate card, telling myself I would transfer it to my personal account later. Room 315 was anonymous and comfortable, with crisp white bedding and generic artwork that demanded nothing from me. I kicked off my heels, ordered a glass of wine from room service, and sat by the window looking out at the city that had become my home by default rather than choice. Sleep came in restless fragments interrupted by dreams, where I stood outside various doors trying to enter rooms where my family gathered without me. By morning, I felt more exhausted than rested, but somehow the raw edge of pain had dulled to a more manageable ache. I ordered breakfast, showered, and put on yesterday's clothes with a grimace. The navy dress that had seemed so perfect now felt like a costume from a play that had closed after a disastrous opening night. I would need to stop at home before going anywhere else. The Sunday morning lobby was quiet, populated by a few business travelers checking out and couples enjoying leisurely breakfasts. No one paid any attention to me as I returned my keycard and walked to the parking garage. I was simultaneously invisible and exposed, certain that everyone could somehow see the rejection branded on me. At home, I finally called Sophia. The conversation was brief but healing. She listened without interruption as I recounted the previous evening, then offered exactly what I needed: validation of my feelings, without suggestions for how to fix a situation that was beyond my control. "What they did was cruel," she said simply, "and it says everything about them and nothing about you." After we hung up, I spent the remainder of Sunday engaged in self-care rather than self-destruction. Instead of diving into work as I might have done in the past, I took a long bath, read a novel that had been sitting on my nightstand for months, and ordered my favorite comfort food. Small gestures of kindness toward myself that would not erase the hurt but might help me carry it more easily. Monday morning arrived with its usual demands: meetings, emails, decisions that required my full attention. I applied makeup with extra care to conceal any lingering signs of emotional distress and chose a red dress that always made me feel confident. The corporate armor was back in place. Premier Marketing's offices occupied 3 floors of a downtown high-rise. As I walked through the open workspace toward my corner office, I nodded greetings to team members already at their desks. No one would guess from my demeanor that anything was amiss. Years of maintaining professional composure regardless of personal circumstances had made me an excellent actress. Thomas was waiting outside my office, a folder in his hands, and an unusual expression on his face. Something between guilt and concern flickered across his features before being replaced by his typical professional demeanor. "Good morning, Jessica. I have the revised layouts for the Meridian campaign ready for your review," he said, his voice slightly more formal than usual. I nodded, unlocking my office door. "Thank you, Thomas. Let me get settled, and we can go through them together." As he followed me into the office, I noticed his eyes tracking my movements with unusual intensity. Did he know what had happened Saturday night? Had Amanda told him about my humiliating dismissal from the birthday dinner? The thought that my professional subordinate might be privy to my personal rejection made my skin crawl. I placed my bag on the desk and turned to face him with the pleasant but slightly distant expression I had perfected for workplace interactions. "The layouts." Thomas handed me the folder but remained standing awkwardly, shifting his weight from one foot to another. This was unlike him. Thomas was typically confident and direct, one of the qualities that had made him valuable to the team. "Is there something else?" I prompted when he remained silent. He cleared his throat. "Jessica, about Saturday night." So he did know. I felt a flash of anger, not at Thomas specifically, but at the situation. My carefully maintained separation between personal and professional life had been breached. The humiliation I had experienced was now potentially office knowledge. "I prefer to keep my personal life separate from work." I interrupted, my tone making it clear the subject was closed. "Shall we review these layouts?" Thomas looked like he wanted to say more but nodded instead. Of course. The client requested more emphasis on the sustainability angle. We spent the next 30 minutes discussing design choices and messaging strategy, our interaction entirely professional. If he occasionally gave me looks of concern when he thought I was not watching, I pretended not to notice. If my responses were slightly more clipped than usual, he was wise enough not to comment. After he left, I sat at my desk staring at the Boston skyline through my office window. The boundary between my professional success and personal failure had never felt so precarious. What if Amanda shared family stories with Thomas? What if my carefully constructed professional image was undermined by secondhand accounts of family rejection? The thought was almost paralyzing. Work had always been my refuge, the place where effort reliably resulted in recognition. If that sanctuary was compromised, what would remain? I had no answer to that question, only the immediate demands of the day to focus on. I opened my email and immersed myself in work, the one area of life where I still felt confident and in control. 2 days after the disastrous birthday dinner, Thomas appeared in my doorway again. This time, he closed the door behind him, a serious expression, replacing his usual easy smile. "I need to speak with you," he said without preamble. "Not as your employee, but as someone who cares about what happened on Saturday." My defenses immediately activated. "Thomas, I have already made it clear that I prefer to keep personal matters separate from work." He nodded but did not retreat. "I understand and respect that boundary, but what happened was wrong and I cannot pretend I was not there or that it did not affect me as well." The realization that he had witnessed my rejection firsthand, rather than hearing about it secondhand, made the situation even worse. Had he been in the room when my father turned me away? Had he seen me struggle to maintain composure? The thought made me physically ill. "I appreciate your concern," I said stiffly, "but I would prefer not to discuss it." Thomas took a seat across from me without being invited, a breach of our usual professional protocol. Jessica, I need to tell you what happened after you left. Not for gossip, but because you deserve to know. Part of me wanted to dismiss him immediately, to shut down this conversation before it could reopen wounds that were still raw. But another part, the part that had always sought truth, even when painful, needed to hear what he had to say. Go ahead, I finally said, clasping my hands tightly on the desk. Thomas leaned forward, his expression earnest. First, I want to apologize for not intervening. I was caught off guard by the whole situation. Amanda had told me she invited you, and I was looking forward to seeing you interact with your family outside the office. So the invitation had been genuine, at least on Amanda's part. That was something, however small. When your father intercepted you at the door, none of us expected what happened next. It all occurred so quickly. One minute we were waiting for you to join us, and the next your father was returning to the table saying you had dropped off a gift but could not stay. I felt a surge of anger. That is not what happened. I know, Thomas replied quietly. I could see the interaction from my seat, but most people at the table accepted his version without question. He described how the dinner had proceeded with superficial normality after my departure. Conversations about neighborhood news, compliments on the food, reminiscences about past family gatherings. It was only when dessert arrived that my mother opened the gifts, including the silver-wrapped package I had brought. She loved the pearls, Thomas said. Her eyes actually teared up when she saw them. She put them on immediately and asked who they were from. Your father said they were from the family, but Amanda spoke up and said they were specifically from you. That small act of honesty from my sister offered minimal comfort. She had acknowledged my gift, but had remained silent during my rejection at the door. After the cake, some of your relatives started discussing your absence. Your Aunt Patricia asked why you were not there, and your father said something about you always being too busy with work to make time for family. The unfairness of this characterization stung anew. How many invitations had I extended over the years, only to be met with polite refusals or outright silence? Thomas continued describing how the conversation had gradually shifted to my career, with various family members offering opinions on marketing as a profession. Most comments were dismissive, suggesting it was essentially glorified advertising with no real substance. Your father was particularly vocal, Thomas said, with visible discomfort. He made a comment about how you had always chosen the easiest path, going for a creative career instead of something that required real intelligence or discipline. Each word felt like another rejection, another confirmation that my achievements meant nothing in my father's eyes. I maintained my professional mask, though. Inside, I was that rejected child all over again. Several people laughed, Thomas continued. It seemed like a familiar pattern, this dismissal of your career. But then your father said something about how you probably just pushed papers around and took credit for other people's creativity. Thomas paused, his expression shifting from discomfort to something fiercer. That is when I stood up. I could picture it clearly, Thomas, usually so careful about professional boundaries, rising from his chair at a family dinner where he was present as my sister's boyfriend, not my employee. I did not plan what happened next, he admitted. But I could not sit there and listen to them dismiss everything you have built. So, I introduced myself properly, not just as Amanda's boyfriend, but as a senior designer at Premier Marketing. And then I said, "That is my boss you are talking about." He described how the room had fallen silent, every eye turning to him in surprise. I told them that you are one of the most respected executives in the industry, that clients specifically request to work with you because of your strategic insight, that you have built campaigns that transformed struggling brands into market leaders, that you work harder than anyone I have ever met and still make time to mentor junior staff and volunteer for industry education programs. My throat tightened as he continued. No one had ever defended me to my family before. No one had ever challenged their narrative about who I was and what I had accomplished. Your mother seemed shocked but almost proud, Amanda looked torn between embarrassment and agreement. Some of your relatives appeared genuinely surprised, as if they had never considered that you might actually be excellent at your job, but your father just looked angry. Thomas had not stopped there. He had specifically addressed my father's claim about taking credit for others' work. I told them about how you stayed until midnight helping me rework a concept that was failing, even though you could have just assigned it to someone else. How you always ensure that team members receive public credit for their contributions. How you have promoted more women and people of color into leadership roles than any other executive at the company. He had finished by stating clearly that I was not just good at my job but transformative in my approach to leadership, that working for me had made him a better designer and a better professional, that the company's success was directly tied to my vision and work ethic. Then I apologized for the interruption, thanked everyone for including me in the celebration, and left. Thomas concluded. I felt I could not stay after that. Amanda texted me later, quite upset. She said I had embarrassed her family and overstepped boundaries. I sat in stunned silence, trying to process everything he had shared. Thomas had risked his personal relationship to defend my professional reputation. He had challenged the family narrative that had diminished me for decades. He had seen me not as they portrayed me, but as I actually was. Why did you do that? I finally asked. It could have cost you your relationship with Amanda. Thomas met my gaze directly. Because it was the truth. And because I have watched you lead with integrity for 3 years, while hearing a completely different version of you from Amanda's family. The disconnect was too great to ignore. He hesitated before adding, also because I know what it is like to have family members who cannot see your true worth. My parents still think graphic design is a hobby, not a career. They introduce me as their son who draws pictures for advertisements despite my degree and position. For the first time since Saturday night, I felt something other than humiliation and pain. A sense of being truly seen and valued, not for conforming to someone else's expectations, but for who I actually was and what I had genuinely accomplished. Thank you. I said simply, the words inadequate for what his actions meant to me. Thomas nodded and rose to leave. I should get back to work. I just thought you should know what happened. As he reached the door, I called after him, Thomas, is everything okay with you and Amanda? He paused, hand on the doorknob. We are still talking. She was angry at first, but seems to be reconsidering some things. Time will tell. After he left, I sat motionless, absorbing the implications of what he had shared. My family dinner had continued without me, but for once someone had challenged the narrative about who I was. Someone had stood in that room and declared my worth when I could not do so myself. The rejection still hurt. The years of estrangement still weighed heavily. But Thomas's account had shifted something fundamental in how I viewed the situation. This was not just about me failing to meet impossible standards. It was also about my family's inability or unwillingness to see who I had actually become. For the first time, I considered the possibility that their rejection reflected their limitations, not mine. The weeks following that conversation with Thomas brought unexpected developments. At work, our professional relationship continued smoothly, though, with a new undercurrent of mutual respect that transcended hierarchy. If other staff members noticed any change in our interaction, they did not comment. Thomas and Amanda apparently worked through their disagreement. I occasionally overheard him mentioning weekend plans that included her, though he remained scrupulously professional in keeping personal matters separate from work discussions. I respected his discretion and never asked for updates on their relationship. The most surprising development came 13 days after the birthday dinner. My assistant Natalie appeared at my office door during a rare quiet moment between meetings. Jessica, you have a personal call on line 2, she said. Elaine Patterson. My mother had not called my office in years. I stared at the blinking light on my phone for several seconds before finally picking up the receiver. Mom, I said, unable to keep the surprise from my voice. Jessica. Her voice sounded older than I remembered, or perhaps just more hesitant. I hope I am not interrupting your workday. Not at all, I assured her, signaling to Natalie to close the door. Is everything okay? A pause. Yes. Well, no. I mean, everyone is healthy, but things are not really okay. I waited, unsure what to say. After decades of surface-level conversations, we had no script for genuine communication. I am wearing the pearls, she said abruptly. They are beautiful. Thank you. You are welcome, I replied. I am glad you like them. Another silence stretched between us, filled with unspoken history. Jessica, I need to see you, my mother finally said. Not with your father, not with Amanda, just us. Can we meet for lunch? The request was so unexpected that I momentarily lost my customary poise. Yes, I said when I recovered. When? We arranged to meet at a small cafe midway between my office and her home the following day. After hanging up, I sat staring at the phone, trying to process what had just occurred. My mother had reached out independently, had explicitly stated she wanted to see me without my father present. In 35 years, I could not remember her ever doing that. The lunch itself proved even more remarkable. My mother arrived wearing the pearl necklace I had given her, a detail that did not escape my notice. She seemed nervous, twisting her wedding band repeatedly as we ordered and exchanged initial pleasantries about the weather and the cafe's decor. When our food arrived, she finally addressed what had brought us together. What happened at my birthday was wrong, she said quietly. I want you to know, I had no idea your father would turn you away. Amanda told me she had invited you, and I was looking forward to seeing you. Then why did you not say anything? I asked, the question that had haunted me for days. You were right there. My mother looked down at her barely touched salad. I have spent 60 years avoiding confrontation, Jessica. That does not excuse my silence, but it might help explain it. She twisted the napkin in her lap. By the time I realized what had happened, you were already gone. Gerald told everyone you had dropped off a gift, but could not stay. The familiar pattern of my father controlling the narrative, and my mother accepting it without question. But something was different this time. The fact that we were having this conversation at all. Thomas's words at dinner made me realize how little I know about your life now, she continued. He spoke about you with such respect. It made me ashamed that a young man who has known you for 3 years could see what your own family has refused to acknowledge. She reached across the table to touch my hand briefly. I have missed so much of your life, Jessica. Out of fear, out of habit, out of misplaced loyalty. I cannot change the past, but I would like to know who you are now, if you will let me. That lunch became the first of many. Every Thursday for the next several months, my mother and I met at the same cafe. Initially, our conversations remained cautious, focused on safe topics like books we had read or exhibits at the museum. Gradually, we began to share more my challenges at work, her renewed interest in painting our individual journeys through therapy. I learned that my mother had started seeing a counselor after my father's heart scare 2 years earlier had forced her to confront the possibility of life without him. I realized I did not know who I was, apart from being Gerald's wife and Amanda's mother, she confessed during our 4th lunch. Somehow along the way, I lost the part of me that was Elaine. She had lost the part of herself that was my mother too, though neither of us said this aloud. Some truths were still too painful to articulate directly. My father remained unaware of our meetings, believing my mother was attending an art class during those hours. I felt uncomfortable with the deception, but understood her need to establish this connection independently before risking his disapproval. Small steps toward autonomy after decades of acquiescence. Amanda reached out 6 weeks after the birthday dinner. Her text was brief. Can we talk coffee sometime? We met at a Starbucks near her dental practice, both of us tense and uncertain. The conversation began awkwardly with superficial questions about work and the unseasonably cold weather. Eventually, Amanda addressed the elephant in the room. "I should have said something when Dad turned you away," she admitted, shredding a napkin into tiny pieces. "I was shocked. He had told me he was fine with you coming. Yet you said nothing," I observed, trying to keep accusation from my tone. She nodded miserably. "I have spent my entire life avoiding Dad's disapproval. You know how he gets." I did know. The cold silence, the withering comments, the withdrawal of affection. I had experienced it all growing up, had chosen to break free, rather than continue seeking approval that never came. Amanda had made a different choice, staying within the family circle at the cost of her own voice. "Thomas really stood up for you," she continued. "I was embarrassed at first, but later I realized he was right. The things Dad says about you are not true. They never were." We did not solve decades of family dysfunction in one coffee meeting, but it was a beginning, an acknowledgement that the patterns that had shaped our childhood did not have to determine our relationship as adults. We began texting more regularly, occasionally meeting for quick lunches when our schedules aligned. My father remained the one unchanged element in the family equation. He never acknowledged what had happened at the birthday dinner, never apologized for turning me away, never expressed interest in my life or career, despite Thomas's revelations about my professional success. I accepted that this might never change. Some wounds are too deep, some patterns too ingrained, some people too committed to their version of reality to see alternatives. At work, I continued to thrive. Premier Marketing secured 3 major new clients under my leadership, and I was nominated for an Industry Leadership Award. Thomas received a well-deserved promotion to Creative Director, a move that reflected his talent rather than any personal connection. Our professional relationship remained productive and mutually respectful. Sophia Ever, my most loyal supporter, celebrated each small victory in my journey toward healing. "You are creating the family you deserve," she told me over dinner one evening. "Some related by blood, others by choice." She was right. My circle now included my mother in a new, more authentic relationship, Amanda in a tentative but growing sisterhood, Thomas as a respected colleague who had seen my worth when others did not, Sophia and other friends who had become my chosen family over the years. My father's absence was a persistent ache, but no longer a defining wound. 6 months after the birthday dinner rejection, I hosted a small gathering at my apartment to celebrate my promotion to executive vice president. My mother attended wearing the pearl necklace and bringing a painting she had created specifically for my office. Amanda came with Thomas, their relationship apparently stronger for having weathered the family storm. Sophia and several close friends completed the circle. As I looked around at these people who valued me for who I actually was, rather than who they wanted me to be, I realized something profound. Worthiness is not determined by those who reject us, but by the courage to remain true to ourselves and open to those who see our authentic value. The journey from rejection to self-acceptance had not been linear. There had been setbacks along the way, moments when old insecurities resurfaced, times when I questioned whether maintaining family connections was worth the emotional cost. But each step, however small, had moved me toward a more integrated sense of self. My story does not have a perfect Hollywood ending. My father and I remain estranged. Family gatherings are still complicated negotiations of who will attend and under what circumstances. But I have found peace in accepting what cannot be changed while remaining open to connections that bring mutual respect and joy. If you have ever felt rejected by those who should love you most, know that your worth is not diminished by their inability to see it. Family is both what we are born into and what we create through chosen connections. The journey to self-acceptance may be long, but each step brings you closer to the authentic life you deserve. Have you ever experienced rejection from family members? How did you handle it? Share your story in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more real-life experiences. And remember, sometimes the people who truly see us are not those we expected, but those who recognize our worth without conditions or expectations. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you find the courage to write your own.